aside into a fiery furnace where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, I'm not necessarily inviting you to look around, but that's the situation in this room. And by the way, this isn't the only place where Jesus teaches this. I mean, earlier, just a few weeks ago, we heard the parable of the sower, right? The sower goes out to sow seeds. Some falls among the paths, some falls among the rocks, some falls among the thorns, and then there's those that fall in good soil. And it looks like, for these various different places where they're sown, that the gospel's done its work. Even among the rocks, it grows up quickly, but then fades away. Even among the thorns, it looks like things are going. The plant grows, but eventually the cares and concerns of this life choke it out. It's only 1 out of 4 of those sowings that actually result in the good plant in the good soil. If you just go back earlier in Jesus' teaching, I hope you listen to these words. Jesus clearly says, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father." Jesus says, "Many will say to me on that day, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons and perform many miracles?' Then I will tell them plainly, 'I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers.'" Here, I think, is what we'd like to think. I'd like to think it. We would like to think that if it all ended right now, that everybody who's here, together as a group, we would be ushered into the kingdom of heaven. I mean, we're all here, and we'd like to just think that as a group, we'll be ushered in. We'd like to think, I've been caught in the net. I'm with the group. I've been brought up onto the shore. But Jesus said, nope. That's not how it is. And you even catch in this passage that I just read, there are those who are going to claim the group. "Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name? And in your name drive out demons? Didn't we do that? Look, didn't we?" He's going to say, "I never knew you." I mean, we think that because we're part of this group, we're in. And Jesus says, nope. At some point, there's going to be a sorting. Jesus, he's the one who said this, "Make every effort to enter through the narrow gate." He says, "Wide is the gate and broad is the road that lead to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and few find it." He's teaching that listen, you cannot just think, I'm a part of the group. I'm in. I'm in that net. I'm being hauled up on shore. So no. And again, I'm not saying we should kind of look around the room and try and figure out which of us is going to be a good fish and which isn't. Instead, I'm suggesting that we should look right here. And that's why I think that these parables need to go together, by the way. Jesus, as he was teaching, he says, okay, maybe some of you now, you're right now, you're asking yourself, well, am I one of those good fish? Or might I be sorted out? You may have that question in your mind. And I think Jesus gives us a couple pictures of what it's like if you are one of those good fish. He says in this very first parable, in verse 44, he says this, "You want a picture of my kingdom? This is what it's like. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field." All right, so you want a picture of the kingdom? Here's what it looks like. I don't know, I just have it this way in my mind, that there is some man who's walking along. He's traveling, perhaps he's trying to get to town quickly, and as he's walking, he cuts through a field, and as he cuts through the field, the staff goes down. What's that? He bends down, he begins to dig, he finds a treasure box. It's clear to him that that treasure box has been hidden there for years, maybe hundreds of years. Apparently the person who once owned it, they're long gone, and the person who owns this field now has no idea that that's there. And he pulls that out, and there's just money, gold, gems, pearls in there, that they're riches that exceed his wildest imagination. He's never seen a treasure like this before. In an instant, he thinks to himself, I can't just take this. If I take this, the owner of the field will come and claim that it's his. So he hatches a plan. Covers it back up, puts it back in the ground, puts the dirt over it. He goes, he takes all of his possessions, he sells him, he goes to the owner of the field, he says, here, I'd like to buy your field. The owner agrees. Now he owns that treasure. There's a similar parable. I think the idea is somewhat the same. It says, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away, sold everything he had, and bought it. Very similar kind of parable. I think the point, more or less exactly the same. There's a merchant who is very acquainted with pearls. He knows what to look for. And as he's going out, he's looking for all kinds of various pearls. He finds one. He finds one. And the person who's selling it has no idea what it's worth. Completely selling it for a price that's far under what it's worth. And he says to himself, this is my chance. He goes, he sells everything he has, and he buys that pearl. Because he's found a treasure. Because it's worthwhile. Jesus says, you want a picture of my kingdom? That's what it's like. By the way, I don't know if you know this or not, but if you read through the Gospel of Matthew, there is this whole theme built on the idea of treasure. Jesus has a series of teachings where he's talking about finding a treasure, buying that treasure, possessing that treasure. And I'd just like to kind of run through that with you. It begins in Matthew chapter 6. Jesus is teaching in the Sermon on the Mount. He says something like this: don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. Don't do that. It's not worth it. It's all going to come to nothing. That is not a treasure worth having. But, he says, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust don't destroy, where thieves don't break in and steal. It says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, we may say to ourselves, well, Jesus doesn't want us to store up treasure, obviously. Wrong. Jesus wants you to store up treasure. Store up for yourselves, treasures in heaven. Very individualistic thing to do. It almost seems selfish, except Jesus told us that's what we should do. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. That's the first place where Jesus talks about treasure. Second place he talks about it's in this parable in chapter 13. He says the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man finds it, he hides it again and then goes out with joy, sells everything he has in order that he may buy it. That's the next time that Jesus talks about the treasure. And again, this idea is, man, this is something that you want. There's a third time that he talks about treasure. It's in chapter 19. Maybe you'll remember this story. There's a rich young man who comes up to Jesus. He says, Jesus, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus says, you know the commandments. He says, yeah, I've been doing all those since I was a little boy. Jesus says, okay, there's one thing you lack. He says, go sell everything you have and give to the poor. Then, Jesus says, you will have treasure in heaven. And do you remember what that rich young man did? Bible says he walked away sad because he was a man of great wealth. As he looked at the situation, he didn't understand what that treasure was worth. And he looked at all he had. He said, that's worth more. I think I'll keep that. I would say, as this teaching of treasure goes along, that man missed the point. He missed